Welcome to part 2 of our series looking at what's happened to some of the cars from the Wheeler Dealer series. This time we're going to be looking at a 1968 Austin Mini Mk1, a 1984 Mercedes-Benz 230e, and finally a 1986 Ford Capri 1.6 Laser. The budget in the first series of Wheeler Dealers was £1,000 to buy and repair a car and then sell it on for a profit. The cars featured here were in episodes 7 to 12, and the reason there's 6 episodes and only 3 cars is that in the very first series it was down to 2 30-minute episodes rather than the 1 hour one that we became familiar with later on. Now, first up is this Austin Mini Mk1. Now, we know nowadays these are sought after car, but back in 2003 when this car featured in the programme, they were nowhere near as sought after. Now, Mike went out and found one, a 1968 Mk1. Now, this is one of the very late Mk1s, and he paid just £300 for it. Now, it looked sort of running and drivable, but the paintwork was very poor. Now, and there were a few rust spots on top, which Edd dealt with by putting in a new A panel. They then gave the car a full respray, for which Edd did the preparation. They then had a look at the chrome work and replaced quite a lot of that to sort of bring it up. And then finally Edd did a bit of detailing around the engine. It probably wasn't called detailing back then, but he gave it a good clean down in the paint and it looked really impressive. Now the costs on this were £800, so added to the £300 purchase price, that was £1,100. Now they sold it for just £1,300, which gave them a profit of £200, which didn't seem a lot for all the effort Edd put into getting it repaired. Now, looking at our barometer for values, which is the Practical Classics Condition 1, which is a car generally private sale but with no faults and ready to use, that car in 2023 terms is worth £11,500, which means that car has gone up by £10,300. So that is quite a rise. Now, the question you'll want to know is, what's happened to that car and where is it now? Well, it appears it didn't have much of a very long life. SLA 748F. Now, bear in mind the show went out in November 2003. The last expired MOT on this was June 2007, so just 4 years later. In 2006, it had a lot of work done, but it had actually failed on quite a lot of chassis rust underneath. So it hadn't had an easy time of it under there. After that, it does go quiet. The only element I could find that gave me a bit of a clue was it had appeared on eBay, according to one of the mini forums, in around 2009, but apparently looking quite sorry for itself. I've got a funny feeling this one's another one that's been scrapped. Now next up, we have a 1984 Mercedes-Benz 230e, which is for the Mercedes-Benz aficionados amongst you, the W123 model. Now, Mike, interestingly, found this in a very old school way, which for some of the younger viewers you're probably not even aware of, where there used to be little cards in sort of newsagents and supermarket windows for people to advertise things before there was Marketplace and eBay. And that's how Mike found this car. Now, he got it at a fairly knockdown price for the time of £400 because it needed some work doing to it bodywork wise. It had a damaged wing. But luckily, included in that £400 was a replacement wing ready for Edd to put on. So that was one box ticked. The other problem was it had a damaged windscreen, so they had to get that replaced. And also the steering on it was a bit vague, so they replaced the steering box and improved that. And finally, Edd in his usual way gave the engine and the gearbox a bit of a service. Now the costs on this were £576.50, and that car then sold for £1,500, which gave a profit of £523.50. Now, I was unsure where the value of these cars are, because I know some of these early Mercedes are going up quite high. But for a Condition 1 Practical Classics valuation, that's 5,750 at the moment. So that would have been an increase of 4,250 on what they sold it for. Now, what happened to B924LLO? Sorry, I couldn't quite see it there. I can't remember all the details, of course. Now, it was featured in the programme in November 2003. Next thing that seemed to follow through was a change of V5 in December 04. So that suggests it got sold on at least once after the programme. It then failed its MOT in January 06. And not in a spectacular way. I think it was an exhaust leak, that kind of thing. But it never got repaired. There's no sort of change of ownership or anything since then. So, again, sadly, I've got deep suspicions this one has been scrapped. So, there we go. Another one bites the dust. Just before we go on to the last car, just that usual request, can you just nip down there and click that subscribe button for us if you're enjoying this content. If you're here still, you must be having a bit of pleasure out of watching us, and that will give us real motivation to carry on this series and try and see if we can actually track down some of these cars and see what's happening to them. I've already had a lead on one of the Porsche 944s from the later series, so we're already starting to get there. Now, last up, a car that I really like. I've had several myself. Ford Capri 1986 1.6 laser. Now, Mike got this as a bit of a knockdown price, of course. That was £400. It did need some work. Bodily wise, it really wasn't good, and it had a few issues with the front end. Now, Mike fitted two replacement, Edd, of course, got that wrong. Edd, of course, replaced the front wings with some pattern parts and painted them themselves. Unfortunately, the match really wasn't good, and that you'll hear come back to haunt them when they try to sell it. Now, they also replaced the front bumper. They had to put some new tyres on it at the front end, and also they replaced the fog lights just to smarten it up at the front end. Now, cost-wise on this, they spent £545, and yes, that poor paint came back to haunt them, because in a very rare case with wheeler dealers, they actually lost money, and so they only sold it for £700, which was a loss of £245. Now, looking at valuations today, I felt it was unfair to give it a Condition 1 valuation, so I've gone between Condition 1 and Condition 2, which is £5,000, which I think is fair for the state that car was in, and that is an increase based on today's values compared to what it was of £4,300, which is quite a nice step up. Now, of course, you want to know what happened to it. D527SJN, its programme went out on the 11th of November 2003. Its road tax had run out the end of the previous month, would you believe? So before the programme had even gone to air, it was out of tax, which, and of course, it wasn't left on the road because nobody uses a car on the road without road tax, do they? And the last V5 change was actually in April 2004, so it did change hands afterwards. Now, whether someone was looking to actually restore that car and get it going again, I don't know, but it never actually got any further than that. It hasn't had gone in for an MOT, so that one has just disappeared, and I think at that point in time, Capri values were so low, it just got scrapped or broken for parts in some way. Now, that concludes our efforts to show you what's happened to the cars from the first series of Wheeler Dealers. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please do click that subscribe button, because we'll be back soon with Series 2, and hopefully we're going to find a car that's still on the road, and you never know, we might even find the owner.